There are nights that slip quietly through history, nights that leave no battle, no coronation, no discovery, only a question that refuses to die. In the winter of 1638, across the coasts of Western Europe, that question took shape in the sky. It was the night the moon forgot to rise. No one wrote a law that day. No war was won. No king was crowned. But thousands of eyes turned upward, and for the first time in living memory, saw nothing. No pale arc above the harbor. No reflection in the water. Only darkness stretching so completely, it felt alive. The day itself had been unremarkable. The fishermen of Calais mended their nets. Monks in Canterbury copied scripture by candlelight. And in Lisbon, the sea glittered under a calm, forgiving sky. But as dusk fell, something subtle began to shift, an absence too quiet to name. A shepherd in Normandy noticed it first. He told his son later that the air had gone thin, like breath before a storm. Birds that should have flown back to the trees stayed silent on the fences. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the tides began to misbehave. When night came, there was nothing. Not a sliver of moonlight on the waves. Not even the faint haze that should have marked where it would rise. People waited. They stared at the same patch of horizon, the same way one might wait for a late friend who never arrives. Minutes turned to hours, and slowly, the waiting became fear. The earliest record comes from a merchant ship called La Providence, anchored off the coast of Brittany. Her captain, Henri de Vaillant, was an orderly man, a man who believed the heavens were clocks made by God, and that the sea only looked endless because it obeyed. That night his logbook reads, "The moon did not appear, though the sky was clear." We waited until the second watch. The sea rose unnaturally, as if drawn by a hand we could not see. By midnight, waves began breaking against the deck. Compass needles spun. One sailor claimed he saw a light moving beneath the surface, as if the sea had swallowed the stars. They tried to drop anchor, but the current pulled westward toward open ocean. No one slept. By dawn, La Providence had drifted 20 miles off course and run aground on a reef. 3 men were lost, far inland, in a small English village named East Haven. The church bell rang long after curfew. Its keeper, Brother Silas, wrote in his nightly chronicle, "The moon is gone. I searched the heavens and found her place empty. The Lord tests us with silence tonight." Villagers gathered in the churchyard, candles shaking in their hands. They spoke of the end times, of angels hiding their faces, of sins too heavy to be forgiven. Children cried without knowing why. Silas tried to calm them, but when the dogs began howling at the unseen sky, his own voice faltered. He later confessed to hearing something in that howl, a rhythm, almost human. A voice calling from the direction of the sea. Across the channel, in a Portuguese fishing village near Setúbal, a widow named Inês de Moura sat by her window facing the ocean. Her husband had died the year before, taken by fever on a voyage to the Azores. Every night since, she lit a candle for him when the moon rose. That night, she waited with the flame in her hands. But the sea remained black, no shimmer, no glow, only the hollow sound of waves folding into each other. Hours passed. Her candle burned to nothing. When neighbors found her the next morning, she was sitting by the same window, still waiting. The wax hardened around her fingers. They said her eyes were open, fixed on the horizon, as if she had seen something there right before the darkness took her. By midnight, the phenomenon stretched from Ireland to the western edge of Spain. No cloud cover, no fog, just absence. Astronomers in Paris noted a dark pall upon the heavens, though stars were visible everywhere else. Some invisible curtain had swallowed the moon's reflection, but left the rest untouched. It wasn't shadow, it wasn't eclipse. It was wrong. One priest in Rouen claimed it was a sign of the second flood. A farmer in Cornwall thought it was the devil's shroud. And somewhere in the north, a group of Jesuit scholars quietly began writing letters that would take months to reach each other. Yet all contained the same question. Has the moon died? When dawn finally broke, the world exhaled. The sky was pale again, the sun untroubled, the tides calm, and the moon had returned, hanging faint and white above the horizon, as if nothing had happened. But something had changed. In every port and village, stories had already begun to spread. People spoke of the light that flickered inside the darkness, of voices under the water, of a sound like breathing from the clouds. 3 ships wrecked. 2 cities burned, though neither near the coast. And each survivor, when asked what they remembered, said the same thing. It wasn't dark, it was watching. The sea never keeps secrets for long, but that night, it tried. The surviving helmsman of La Providence wrote that the ocean turned to glass, its surface motionless, yet boiling underneath. He remembers the lanterns, how their flames bent eastward though no wind blew, and how the ropes hummed like cellos, vibrating with a tone no human throat could make. At the 3rd bell of the watch, Captain Henri ordered the anchor dropped. It fell and kept falling, as though the bottom of the sea had disappeared. Then came the sound. Not thunder, not surf. A deep, deliberate breath. Men froze. One sailor dropped to his knees, whispering a prayer that belonged to no known scripture. When dawn came, the deck was dusted in a thin white residue, like frost. Fish lay tangled in the rigging dead, but with gills still moving. Henri never sailed again. Locals said he spent his last years inland, facing the mountains, and every full moon he stood on his porch, staring west, waiting for it not to rise. Brother Silas was used to silence, but this silence had texture. It pressed against the skin, thick as wool. He was writing a sermon on divine order when the candles guttered out. No draft, no sound, just instant darkness. He rose, walked to the cloister window, and looked up. The sky above the abbey was a star map torn open. Where the moon should have been, there was a perfect circular hole. He felt dizzy looking at it, as though gravity itself leaned inward. When he rang the bell to summon the other monks, there was no echo. Even the stone refused to carry sound. The next morning, the abbot found his journal on the lectern. The final line was smudged by wax, but still legible. If God has turned his face away, perhaps it is to let us see what looks back. Brother Silas was never found. Only his robe, folded neatly at the tower's base, and the bell rope, swaying gently though no wind stirred. In East Haven, a boy named Thomas Green could not sleep. He was 9. He feared the dark, but that night, the dark seemed to fear him. He crept outside barefoot. The village slept, but the air vibrated like a struck chord. He looked up and saw nothing. He said later, it wasn't that the moon was missing. It was hidden behind something breathing. He saw movement inside that blackness, ripples, slow and circular, like ink spreading in water. Then, a single flash green-white, like lightning under the sea. He thought it was beautiful. He thought it was calling him. At dawn, his parents found his footprints leading down to the shore and stopping at the tide line. No body, no sound. Only the small wooden toy boat he always carried, rocking gently on the waves. Years later, when the sea receded after a storm, that same toy was found miles inland, balanced on a dead tree branch facing west. In 1640, a year after the disappearance, an unsigned letter arrived at the Vatican. It read, "The night the moon vanished, I saw men walk upon the sea as though it were stone. They were not sailors nor men. Their eyes burned green like lanterns, and their mouths did not open when they spoke. One turned and looked at me, and I understood him without sound." The letter was unsigned, sealed in tar, and postmarked from no known port. It was never filed in the archives, but a copy was found centuries later among confiscated heretical documents. Its final line written in trembling ink: "The moon returned, but it brought something with it." Decades later, witnesses still spoke of the silence. Some described it as terror, others as peace. But all agreed it wasn't natural. Old sailors claimed the stars moved differently that night. Farmers said their shadows bent the wrong way. Dogs howled at fields instead of the sky. Each told their own version, but one detail stayed the same. They all remembered hearing the moon return, not seeing, not feeling, hearing. A sound like metal sighing, a breath drawn by the heavens. The first letter was dated February 1639. Father Matteo da Firenze wrote from his observatory, "The moon trembles through my lens, as if seen through water." Across the channel, astronomer Etienne Duval replied, "The sea no longer listens to the moon." Soon their words crossed Europe, folded into envelopes that smelled of wax and fear. Philosophers, priests, sailors, all wrote the same line: "If the moon can vanish once, what holds it there at all?" Florence, 1639. Matteo stood beneath a domed ceiling lined with constellations. Through his brass telescope he watched the moon shiver, its surface pulsing like a living thing. He called it lumen pulsans, the pulsing light. When he sent his notes to Rome, the church sealed them. Truth, they said, did not require vibration. In Rome, in candlelit corridors, the Holy Office debated quietly. A cardinal whispered, "If the moon lives, then creation breathes, and if it breathes, it can die." The letters were locked away under phenomena temporaria, temporary things. But a young scribe named Lucien Moreau copied them by night. He hid the copies between hymnals bound for France. Those fragments, rescued centuries later, became the only surviving record of what Europe's brightest minds feared to name. A smoky salon, 1640. Duval stood before men who pretended not to tremble. "Not an eclipse," he said, a dimming as if the moon recoiled from being seen. Someone laughed. "You speak as though the heavens feel shame." Duval smiled without humor. "Then tell me, monsieur, What kind of light fears the eye? Silence. For the first time, the age of reason looked afraid. Far north in Uppsala, monks translated an Old Norse hymn about Mani's sleep. In its margin, a newer hand had written, 1638, the cycle renewed. The pattern was forming. Every 1,000 years, the same blank night returned. And with it, floods, madness, renewal. Lucien's stolen pages reached Duval. Old, nearly blind, he drew a map not of the moon, but of its absence. He marked where the light failed, where tides misbehaved, where witnesses vanished. When the points were joined, they formed a perfect spiral turning toward one place in the Atlantic. He named it Heart of the Tide. The book, De Luna Silentiae, was banned before printing. When rediscovered centuries later, half its pages were burned black, the last line still legible. The sky forgot her moon because we taught her how to forget. When Father Mateo's final note was found, it carried a single phrase, "This has happened before." And so the search turned away from telescopes toward ruins. Because sometimes the oldest memories of the sky are not written in books. They are carved into stone. In Mesopotamia, tablets from the city of Ur told of Nana's disappearance. For one night, his silver chariot did not cross the heavens. The rivers turned inward. The cattle refused to drink. Archaeologists once called it myth. But in the same layers of clay, they found something impossible. Tidal residue hundreds of miles inland, dated to the same year. Across the world, Ming Dynasty astronomers recorded every movement of the stars. Yet one page in the imperial log for 1638 was blank, except for a margin note. The night of no moon. The silence troubled the dogs. That line grew into legend, the night of the sleeping pearl. They said the jade rabbit who lived upon the moon had fallen asleep, and his dreams spilled across the heavens like smoke. Every 1,000 years he would rest again, and while he dreamed, the earth would forget itself. The scholars dismissed it as poetry, but in forgotten temples, the story was sung as prayer. Far to the north, the old sagas spoke of Mani's rest, the night when the moon god, weary of watching mortals, descended into the sea to cool his light. For that single night, the world lost its reflection. Tides froze, wolves forgot how to howl. Even shadows refused to follow their masters. It was not fear. They felt it was reverence. Because for them, darkness meant renewal. The moon did not die. It dreamed. When translators rediscovered the hymn centuries later, they noticed a curious line. Sleep, white eye, sleep. We will wait beneath your dreaming. No one knew why that melody was still sung by villagers in East Haven, in a tongue they did not understand. In the desert of Thebes, a papyrus told of a night when the moon closed its eye and Ra sailed the sky without reflection. The priests drew silver circles on the ground, symbols meant to anchor the heavens in place. They called it the turning of the eye. To them, it was not the end, but the breath before rebirth. Creation, pausing to inhale. Europe trembled at the moon's disappearance. But Egypt had already named it balance. In 1972, anthropologists in the Philippines recorded a chant from a tribe with no written language. It spoke of the night the sea forgot its light, They described fishermen hearing the moon sink beneath the waves and a green glow rising from below. When asked how they knew this song, an elder said, "We sing it when the sky grows too quiet. From Babylon to Beijing, from North Stone to Island Chant, the same rhythm returns, 1,000 years apart. A blank sky, a trembling tide, the sound of breath that isn't wind. The myths do not disagree. They rhyme. They whisper that the universe keeps time, not by rotation or orbit, but by forgetting. When the moon disappears, it is not punishment. It is rest, the universe blinking. One fragment, half burned, unearthed in Crete, describes what happens after. The moon returns, but the world looks away. Men dream of places that do not exist, and wake remembering what the sky has seen. If the legends are true, then forgetting is not a flaw of humanity. It is the way creation renews itself. Every silence in the heavens is a reset of the soul. Centuries passed before anyone dared to give the night a name. Historians called it the lunar null, event of 1638. A phrase so clean, so sterile, it erased the terror behind it. In 1965, a team from Cambridge revisited the old tide charts. They found that the moon's missing night aligned perfectly with a volcanic veil, ash high in the stratosphere, bending light away from Earth. A rational answer, elegant, comforting. But when they ran the numbers, something didn't fit. The ash pattern explained the dimming, not the silence. No one could explain why sound itself had faltered. In 1974, archivists digitizing Etienne Duval's notebooks found one page written in a trembling hand. If the moon vanished by the laws of nature, why did the stars blink? They dismissed it as poetry, until they realized his star maps showed subtle distortions, as though the constellations themselves had been refracted through water. Modern astronomers called it gravitational lensing, but no mass large enough to cause such distortion was ever found. For one night, the laws of reflection had bent. The Earth had stood in the blind spot of its own light. In 2023, the European Space Observatory simulated the night of 1638. Every known variable was fed into a machine. Lunar distance, cloud albedo, atmospheric density. When the system reached 2:14 a.m., it failed. A single error message appeared. Lunar source undefined. The program tried again, failed again. The moon simply refused to exist. And yet, in the simulation's background audio, researchers heard something odd. A low hum, like breath trapped between notes. It wasn't static. It was rhythmic, alive. One technician wrote in his log, "It sounds like the universe remembering something. The moon still rises, faithful, patient, silver over water. Perhaps it never left. Perhaps what vanished that night was not the moon, but our certainty that the sky will always obey." The sailors' stories, the monks' prayers, the myths carved in stone, they remain because they belong to something older than memory. The instinct that light can love us enough to leave, so we remember what darkness feels like. Humanity fears absence. We build gods, equations, telescopes to fill it, but sometimes forgetting is the design. The universe needs silence the way lungs need air. Every so often, creation must close its eyes. so that when it opens them again, we may see differently. That night in 1638 wasn't an error. It was a heartbeat, a breath between eternities. Today, scientists can predict eclipses to the second, measure lunar distance with lasers, and still, one truth remains. The sky belongs to mystery. If one night the horizon glows empty again, no moon, no tide, no reflection, don't be afraid. It only means the world is dreaming again. Here, at Dark Matters of History, we continue to explore the thin line between history and legend. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. See you in the next Dark File.